I've got a log here from Arakon, who is trying to troubleshoot some vibration jello in his video. And you can watch the video for yourself in the original post if you want to. I'm not sure it's going to show up super well on my screen recording, so I'm not going to really focus too much on it. Um, if we look at your command dump, by the way, if you guys submit a command dump, a command line dump, and I encourage you to do that, they give me all the information that I can. Ideally, I would get a full CLI dump, a video, and a black box log, and that would be the best. So if you decide to submit that, give me the whole thing. Like, for example, here, it looks like the version line has been cut off, so I'm not 100% sure what version you're using. But I can do a search for loop time, and I find it's not there. And if I search for p-term cut, it's not there. So presumably you're using Betaflight v2, and so fine. So I figured it out, but it would have been nice to have that line. Let's then take a look at your traces, your black box logs. And since we're dealing with vibration and jello, of course, the first place we're going to go is your gyros. And if we look, hang on a second. There we go. If we look, your gyros are super clean, which is to be expected with Betaflight V2. The gyros are just super clean, and they kind of always are. So yay, Boris's filters. Um, so then we got to wonder where this vibration and noise is coming from. So the next place let's look is at your roll and your pitch axis. And this kind of jello is most likely to show up, I think, on pitch, but it could be on roll as well. We'll take a look. Gonna need to zoom in here. And this is again, I did another video earlier this evening on a copter that was using Betaflight V2. And Betaflight V2 makes this job pretty hard because the traces often looks just so good that it's hard to really judge what's going on and to troubleshoot the things that you're seeing that are wrong. Um, let's just take roll off of there to make pitch just a little stronger. And we can see that there's some high frequency noise in the D term here. And we can see that there's a bit of noise also in the P term. But I'm not sure how to judge whether that's a problem or not. I think with a D term cut of 40, we could expect to see a little more noise than normal than we would if we were running, a Betaflight V1 with a D term cut of 12 or 15. It would not, this is not as smooth as it would look if we were under Betaflight V1 with a D term cut of 12 or 15 or something like that. But Betaflight V2 flies so good under many different conditions that I'm not prepared to judge this as a problem yet. And unfortunately, this is one of the downsides of being on the cutting edge is that if you want me to help, I mean, this thread has progressed to the point where I'm not getting very many questions about people who just are doing very basic tuning, and we've only been flying with this for so long, and so it's a little hard. It's a little hard. We're sort of figuring it out as we go. So is this too noisy? I mean, you certainly could try lowering your D-term cut to a lower value. And in fact, you talk about that. D-term cut of 30, certainly worth trying a D-term cut of 20. But we know there's lots of copters out there that fly just fine with a D-term cut of 40. I don't know what your setup is. You don't seem to say what your setup is, but I would be curious what your motors were, what your motors, your props, and so on are. The sound of the motors sound like they may be larger motors, larger, slower motors. I can't tell for sure, but just from the sound of them. And I wonder if you have larger props, which are more prone to vibration than the 5 or 6 or even 4 inch these days props that are commonly used on mini quads. if you're flying a 5-inch or maybe even a 6-inch mini quad, then I'm not sure. Um, if we go back, we can see that there is not a lot of excessive P-term oscillation. The P-term is very well controlled by the gyro filter, and that's some of the magic of Betaflight. The P-term doesn't really seem to exhibit any bad behaviors. You're not trying to tune the P gains. I mean, if we saw excessive P gains, then it might be a different story. But we just don't see that. It looks pretty well behaved on pitch, and I bet it the same thing on roll. It has a bit of a high frequency, these little sort of bumps here, a little bit of a higher frequency noise component that if this were Betaflight V1, I would say, oh, well, we need to filter that more. But the few traces I've looked at from Betaflight V2 seem to have that, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. So I'm not sure that we can judge that to be a problem or not. If we look at just your D terms, because one of the suspicions you've got is D term noise, or excess D maybe. If we look at just the D terms, they do look somewhat noisy, especially pitch looks somewhat noisy. But I'm not sure what would make noise just on pitch. Pitch is usually the most inherently damped of the axes, and we usually see more noise on roll than on pitch. But in this case, that doesn't seem to be what we're seeing. I certainly would look to the physical camera mounting, loose lens, loose camera, etc., bringing that vibration in. If you see the vibration both in the FPV and the HD camera, then that indicates it's something that's probably happening in the copter, not something that's happening on the camera. But if you only see it in the HD or the FPV camera, then it could be an issue with the camera itself, the mounting, it may be not secure, or a loose lens, or a loose sensor. I agree with you that it should not be necessary to do this crazy meticulous balancing of props and motors. Uh, if you have more than about, if a motor by itself has more than about, I think I would say 0.03 G in the acceleration tab and the motors tab, or if you when you put the props on more than something like maybe 0.2 to 0.3, and I'm pulling these numbers from memory in terms of my testing, but that's what I remember. If you've got anything worse than that, then you may have an issue with a bad motor, and that could be it. Um, the other thing that can be done is to look at the gap between the motor bell housing and the motor base, and spin the motor by hand and see that that gap doesn't change. If you've got a bent shaft, the gap will get narrower and thicker, and that's not a good sign for a motor that probably needs to be swapped out. So I gotta say, with the limited experience I have analyzing Betaflight, uh, I don't have a lot of good advice for you there, and I apologize for that. That's just where we're at. But I did want to respond to your video, and since you posted it, to respect the time you put into posting it by making a response. And I would have to say that you might want to look for something mechanical. Last thing, let's just take a look at your settings and see what they look like. PID controller 1, okay. Pitch P of 5, roll P of 3.5. These are pretty close to the defaults. I believe the defaults come in at around 4, and in my experience, they were, for 3S, they were a little low, and for 4S, I mean, it's kind of a red herring to even be thinking about this, because at the end of the day, what we're seeing does not look like P-term oscillation in any way. It's kind of a constant oscillation or vibration, and it appears to be throttle related, so throttle position related. But it doesn't seem like it gets worse at higher throttles Rather, it seems like there are certain throttle positions where it's worse and not others. Whereas if this was P-term problem, you would see that at higher throttles it would be worse and even much worse, go crazy maybe. Whereas at lower throttles it would tend to be okay. If we see that if that vibrations are worse at say 60% throttle, but then better at say 75% throttle, that's not the P term. So I don't think that's what we're looking at here. That's a resonant frequency or something. So it really feels like this is something mechanical and not necessarily tuning related. But yeah, and your D gains are not that high. So the thing is, and this is PID 1. You've got almost no D. If my understanding is correct, Boris removed the divider from PID 1, and so the values for PID 1, the D gains, should be something. Oh no no, I'm looking at the floats. Hang on. Okay, that's better. That's better. Sorry, got a little distracted there. 40 and 55. Yeah, that's a little on the low side, but so yeah, we would expect to see, according to Boris, values in the range of something like 60 to 70, and you've got them around 40 to 55. So when we say, is there D-term noise here? Well, that's going to be caused by excess D gain, but I don't think you have excess D gain. So it feels like something mechanical, but I'm sorry I can't give you better advice as to what it is. Good luck and happy flying, I guess, if you can get rid of the vibrations, huh? Do you have your camera hard mounted? So, I mean, this is kind of too obvious to even mention, but lots of people fly with their camera hard mounted and they're fine, but I can't. I get jello if I have my camera hard mounted. So I put it on bobbins or I put it on some foam and help filter out some of those vibrations, and that may be all the difference you really need. I don't know. Good luck and happy flying.